Hi, Mr. Wartsky here, and today we're going to learn about viruses. There's the link between life and non-life. So, like I said before, viruses are a link between life and non-life. They have no characteristics of life whatsoever. They don't produce energy. They do not grow. They are assembled. They need help to reproduce. They can't move on their own. They don't respond to stimuli, but somehow they are so important to us. They are basically cell-killing machines. The smallest virus is 20 nanometers, and a nanometer is 10 to the negative ninth meters, whereas the largest is 300 nanometers. So they're pretty small. So since they are cell-killing machines, they kill cells. Now the death of tissue, the death of cells, causes our immune system to respond. And when our immune system responds, that's when we get sick. That's when we get the symptoms of the runny noses, the colds, the fevers, the rashes. All that is linked to the immune response to the cells dying. So the viruses are not the diseases. Viruses cause diseases. For example, you might write this down. The rhinovirus causes the common cold. HIV causes AIDS. Herpes simplex 1. Now, 100% of the people in the United States, they have been exposed to herpes simplex 1. That is a common cold sore. Well, herpes simplex 4 is the chicken pox. The Epstein-Barr virus causes the kissing disease known as mononucleosis. The human papillomavirus can cause cervical cancer, or, well, what did you tell me in class? And influenza causes the flu. HPV, there are over 100 different types of HPV viruses. Only 13 of them will cause cancer. And in Gardasil, there are only 4. So 90% of sexually active adults have been tested positive for HPV, and we know how HPV works. And there's a little picture of HPV right there. It's a little selfie that it took of itself. So the protein viruses, I forget that, properties and characteristics. Viruses are basically protein shell that surrounds the genetic material. The protein is called a capsid, and the subunits of the capsid are called capsomeres. Now, the capsid makes shapes, and basically this is how the virus is classified. So here are the main shapes. We have an icosahedron or a polyhedron. That's usually 20 equilateral triangles put together. A spiral is a helical. It looks like an old-fashioned phone cord. Remember what those things look like. Trapezoidal, it's HIV. It looks like a trapezoid. Filoviruses look like a wet noodle. And the bacteriophage are the viruses that affect bacteria, and they look like a little lunar lander. And I have the pictures, so you can draw them right here. We have the polyhedral, the helical. That's going to be kind of tough to draw. The bacteriophage, the trapezoidal. Do you see this trapezoid right here? It goes down there. Oh, it looks like a little trapezoid. And the little filovirus. This is Ebola, by the way. Doesn't it look like a little wet noodle? Yeah, like the spaghetti you throw it on the wall. So we have the protein capsid. What else? Well, we have genetic material, and the genetic material is usually double-stranded DNA, that's the normal form, or single-stranded RNA. Now, if a virus has RNA, it is known as a retrovirus. We'll get to that soon. On the surface of the virus, you have receptors that will bind to specific types of cells, and there might be other proteins that can help with the entrance of the virus into the cell. There are some viruses that have proteins that will poke a hole and allow the virus to sneak in. So let's take a look at, we have the HIV has RNA, single-stranded RNA, so it's a retrovirus. It has it's trapezoidal there, and it has these little receptors on top right there, beautiful. Now some viruses, as we'll find, will have a lipid membrane that goes around there. Now there is an enzyme called reverse transcriptase in the HIV, and I'm sure we'll talk about that in a moment. So how does a virus make you sick? So viruses are obligate intracellular parasites that have no way of being transported, and they attack specific cells. So the only way that they can reproduce is they have to get inside of a cell. So the first step is transport, and that is usually done through body fluids, saliva, blood, plasma, semen, vaginal secretions, sweat. A sneeze is a big one. Now, a sneeze can travel at, on average, 60 miles an hour with a radius of 12 feet. That's simply amazing. So the viruses will enter our bodies in any opening that it can. We have a variety of openings: nose, mouth, cuts, anus, penis, vagina. They get through anywhere. And when they get into our bodies, they will bind to specific cells. For example, the chikungunya binds to joints. HIV will bind to Th cells, flu upper respiratory cells, and they will bind to those specific cells by receptors on top of the virus. They can enter the cell. Now, sometimes a virus will have a membrane around it, and that will help get it into the cell a lot easier. The membrane forms a vacuole. They can poke a hole in it, and the capsid can get through, and the enzymes break the capsid down. Or they can inject their genetic material inside of a virus. Big ones are bacteriophage are big for that. When that happens, the DNA of the virus, the viral DNA, will incorporate into your cell's DNA. It just binds, just enters. And when that happens, it is now called a provirus. So every time you get sick, the viral DNA incorporates and makes viruses. So you have the DNA of all these viruses inside of your cells. So here is a membrane that is binding to the receptor, and you notice that the membrane fuses with the cell membrane, and the capsid just enters right on in. Non-enveloped viruses, they can be taken in through by phagocytosis. See how it's binding to the receptor, and they form around the virus and take the virus into the cell. Non-enveloped viruses can also poke a hole and then have it enter, the capsid enters. See, look at that. It pokes a hole there, the capsid enters. Or bacteriophages do it by injecting the DNA into the bacteria. So when the DNA binds, one of two things can happen. It could be lytic. Now, lytic viruses are always lytic. Lysogenic viruses are always lysogenic. Lytic means they're virulent. The virus DNA takes over the cell right away. It produces more viruses, and then the cell dies. Lysogenic, the DNA binds and waits and waits and waits until something tells it to become lytic. Then it reproduces viruses and it kills the cell. We don't know why it becomes lytic all of a sudden. We just know it does. So when the viruses are produced, they can exit in one of two ways. They can either drip one at a time, like this is dripping, it's exiting, exiting, boom, and then the cell will eventually die of exhaustion. Or the Big Bang, which is they have so many viruses in the cell that the cell blows up, releasing all these non-enveloped viruses into the environment, not environment, but into your body to affect more cells. So when we talk about viruses with envelopes, there's a cell membrane that surrounds the virus and the receptors on that membrane. That helps with the entrance of the virus into the cell. And that means that the virus will always leave the cell by the drip method. If it doesn't have an envelope, Big Bang. RNA viruses are retroviruses. There's an extra step. The enzyme reverse transcriptase must change the viral RNA to viral DNA, which then incorporates into the cell's DNA. Just an extra step. But we use reverse transcriptase for our own uses later on. So what are our defenses for these nasty little things that cause diseases? Well, first, phagocytes. Macrophages, neutrophils consume the viruses. And that they can start the whole immune response. Macrophages can. We'll learn about that when we talk about the immune system later on in the year. Antibodies. These are proteins produced by B cells. T helper cells help the B cells produce antibodies. That's why HIV is so tough, because it kills the cells that help your body produce antibodies. Now, the antibodies bind to the viruses, and then phagocytes come along and eat them. Vaccines will help your body recognize, you inject like killed viruses or proteins inside, viral proteins into your body. Your body sees them and produces antibodies for those virus parts. Then they're ready for the secondary infection. When the virus comes in for real this time, they have a buildup of antibody producing cells that can produce antibodies right away, and they cut the response time from 7 to 10 days to 2 to 5 days. It's pretty cool. Over half of it, yeah. And then interferon, which is a protein that's produced by your cells that prevent attachment, entrance, and incorporation. And that's it for viruses. Again, if you have any questions, you can refer to your textbook. You can ask me in class, or you can watch the video over again. Hope this helped.